think, but I'm gonna go Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, today is opening day. I'll take it. No, I mean, I grew up on the north side. Yeah, I'm a.
Are you from here?
Yeah, I'm from Chicago.
What area though?
Lincoln Park, Gold Coast.
Oh, okay. So you know Shirts?
Hmm?
Shirts,
Mhm.
that's right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more Cubs, but I mean, I go to both. You know, I think as you get older, you're not as invested into teams and athletes, you know, what I mean, like particular athletes like that. Anyway, you're like, whatever. Right? And if you got kids, you just go wherever you can find.
So you going with your family?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
So I bounce around. I'll go to Cubs games sometimes, sometimes I go to Sox games. I'll go to the Bears game too, even though I hate the Bears.
Damn.
I hate the management of the Bears, something like that, right? Okay, where we leave off, we talked about social and cultural identities. We have these domains that we are part of. We said name them. Age matters. We could divide age into multitude of groups. Those multitude of groups got entire different world perspectives, consumer behaviors, what they value, what they don't value, what's important to them, what's not. We say race and ethnicity is important, right, as a membership. It may not be important to us, but it's still very much a social force, and it does impact how we purchase and buy and behave and consume. We say things like religion and spirituality impacts us, right? People can play on our heartstrings if they promote spiritual messages or religious messages, right? About, you know, being good, doing good deeds, et cetera, and other factors, right? We say even things like sexual orientation that may influence your consumer behavior, what you buy, what you think is shows your identity, expresses who you are. We tend to like to express who we are and where we come from. We left off talking about parenting styles, right? We say, hey, we got authoritarian, indulgent, and negligent. All right, parenting and consumer behavior. As of 2022, 70% of U.S. households own pets. So people are starting to own dogs more and substitute dogs for children, right? Individuals are not having as many kids as they once had. They're kind of doing more individualized things, traveling, right, enjoying themselves, but they still need some sort of social or emotional support. That's where pets come into the picture. Americans spend more than $100 billion per year on pet food, toys, and other supplies, right? So big business, right? You buy a pet, obviously you need to potentially go to the vet to get shots, inoculations, things of that nature. Pet needs food. You like to buy little cool outfits for dogs and cats, et cetera, So they're very much like an extended part of the family. Age-related life events shape our identity and often guide our consumption choices, right? Age-related, your college age, so you have college life events, right? I'm a little bit older, so maybe you say, I don't know, midlife stuff going on. Right? Yeah, potentially, right? But it also depends too. I may also fall into a different group of older individual with young children, right? Most people may be my age, might have children that's your age, even though, you know, a young guy, what, 25, 26 or something. But we'll see how it shapes our identity and our consumption choices. Teenagers, for example, teenagers prefer autonomy versus belonging. So that means the teenagers are seeking some sort of individualized identity, right? So they may be more inclined to buy, say, like a Balenciaga or something less completely unique and exclusive, right? Someone a little bit older may say that's impractical, right? It's a waste of money. You can only wear it for a certain amount of time. You can't wear it every day. Rebellion versus conformity, right? So we say, hey, at this stage, rebellion exceeds conformity. So kind of rebellious attitudes and also rebellious identities would rebellious consumptions, right? Trying to look different than everybody else within the society. Idealism versus pragmatism, right? Say maybe my age group is a little bit more realistic, as we will call it, about things in our consumptions. Teenagers, not so much, right? They may not consider the price as much. Why? Because they're not paying for it themselves. They tell their parents to buy them coolest things irregardless of price. And then narcissism versus intimacy, right? We say older people, older aged individuals. I can move this one. Older aged individuals are probably a little bit more intimate with family, meaning that they prefer social gatherings and arrangements. They probably want to give more, and they see a sense of comfort in giving. Younger people, not so much, right? You may want to get. Your preference is probably to get, but you may feel that you have a lack of, and you may want to focus on how you look, who you are, status, what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. We can divide this even further. We say there are tweens. His age is 8 to 14. They have a whole different consumer behavior as well too. Consumers at retirement and beyond. Right? The UN says that the people older than the age of 60 are the fastest growing age group on Earth. 700 million people now and 2 billion by 2050. 2 billion people will be over the age of 60, including yourselves. You'll fall into that group as well too, right? Which goes to show you that, hey, you know what, people are having less children, but they had a lot of children around a certain period of time, 1980s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, right? And then it's tapered off. Totally different consumption, right, that we have. Here's a question. Is it practical to assume that people over the age of 60 and over constitute one large consumer market, i.e. the gray market as it's called? Can you divide this group into more groups, into subgroups or subcategories? How can marketers segment this age subclass? So maybe think about your parents or your grandparents, and you say, well, they're not maybe one particular group that consumes the exact same way. Maybe there's people who have different needs at that age or above. But you're like, well, there's a difference. We said 60 or above, we're like, are we talking about people 100? Are we talking about people who are 90? What about the people who are 80? What about a 70-year? What about a 60-year? Do they have different needs and will they consume differently? Can we divide this group into more groups? All right, we'll give you a few minutes within your groups to talk about that.
Professor,
Yeah.
that question is kind of confusing. Like, is it asking like, so they take over like a broad amount of like the consumer market, right?
How can you divide 60 and over into more groups?
Okay, now I'm.
Right? As we saw with teens could be tweens, 8 to 14. You're like, well, what about 15 to 19? Well, 15 to 19 are different than people who are tweens, right? They buy different stuff for different reasons, motives, different identities. What are some factors that marketers can consider? Are there different identities for people who are between age of 60 and 100? Or are they just lumped into one giant group of older people, right? So think about that. How can marketers promote to them in different ways? There's no good there. I said a simple way to think about it is there a difference between your grandparents and your parents? That's an easy way to think. Is there a difference between your grandparents and your parents?
Like the first one that comes to mind for me is like dividing it into like both.
Parents are still young.
Medical assistants or like separate walking versus like the ones doing things.
Wanna be in our group?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you have different
Sure.
You can't leave you by yourself because your partners don't wanna show up.
It's kind of weird because.
So she was saying, you can tell
So
me
I don't
stuff.
know if you're musicals.
Oh, never mind, like, action, sorry, his partner's right there.
question is, if we kind of block individuals 60 years of age or older,
That's it.
can we further divide them into different blocks to market research? Meaning they have different needs, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, and if so, what are the needs? How do we promote them? That's essentially it. Right, think about what's happening in life differently as a grandparent. You could be a grandparent, you're gonna buy differently, right? But you also have children, you might have grown children, and then you have young grandchildren. You may be towards the end of your life, if you are 100, 105, 110. You may know that you're not, gonna last, if you're lucky enough. What are you buying in? Are you planning for your exit out of life? What kind of things do you purchase to plan your exit out of life? Are you leaving stuff to people, right? Cause 60 is young, 60 is very young. I don't think most 60-year-olds have a walker or in a wheelchair, they don't even be on medication.
I'm old, 'cause I'm 24.
Everybody thinks I'm old because I'm 27, right? So it's like, wow, I get a laugh too. Okay,
No, but that was actually funny though. Some people are not funny with us.
Right, maybe, come on, my shoes indicate I'm 27.
Yes,
Jordan.
yes. The whole fake is 26.5.
Man, I think these shoes have some, anybody think my shoes have some riz?
Really? Oh my god. Whoa. You know, my fingers are turning green because I keep washing my hands with these arms. Got my hands.
Hey, by the way, who has a blurb today?
Yeah.
Alright, well, we'll start this way around. Well, maybe we'll start at like 1:50. Alright, thoughts?
When we talked about segmenting them is like, some people are older and they need like assistance with things like walkers and like can't really leave their bed or they need someone watching after them. Some people are the same age but they run around, drive, kayak, and all those things. So that's one way you can segment it.
Yeah, you say, hey, this group, if we place them into one group, we can say there's stark differences between the most 95-year-olds and the 60-year-old, right? Huge difference. Some people are not in really great shape, right? And some people are maybe healthy and don't need as much assistance. Anything else?
Another thing I had mentioned was that there are some people who are over 60 who want to just keep working, and there are others who, as soon as they hit retirement age, they're done, they don't want to keep working.
That's a big one too. Like, hey, in this age group is usually when people stop working. Retirement age, I think, is maybe 67 and a half or 72. I forget, they change it all the time. But you may have stopped working, right? And if you stop working, you save up all your money, right? You're living in hopefully a decent life. You have a different lifestyle. You're golfing, playing tennis, right? Going on vacations. You have a lot of expensive. Maybe finally buy that car you always wanted. You may have a timeshare somewhere in Mexico or something like that, right? You kind of have these whole different kind of way of going about your life. All right, great. What about here? What do you think?
So
So every 10 years, like a milestone of different kind of behavior.
Yes, and then from that segment, those years by people that have grandchildren, people that like to travel,
Mhm.
people that need assistance,
Mhm.
or people that just want to enjoy their retirement.
Okay, so you're right, that's a good way to do it, divide it, by every 10 years and look at the situation of each person within those smaller groups. Here,
What she said was that we should separate them in categories of, people who are in nursing homes and people who live at home by themselves. People, obviously the people over 60, the ones that do have jobs and the ones that don't,
Mhm.
and, yeah, the most, is that it?
Alright, so you say, hey, living situations, divide them by living situations and working situations. Right, so two categories, right, living situations where do you live at home by yourself and you're older? Or are you in an assisted facility and older? Are you, still working age or are you retired? Okay. What about you?
Yeah, so I think that you can segment it very differently depending on the age group. I think that when you first turn 60, they're talking about retirement or still working. I think that like that age, like they are very much still like, I wanna say adventurous. It's like, you know, you're fresh out of work probably, like that's like a whole different chapter of your life. So
Yeah.
like I think that they're willing to, you know, explore or like try different stuff and like as you said, like goals. So I think that like you can definitely market towards that, especially like retired age, because it's like, you know, what else are you expecting, you
Mhm.
know? And then I think that as you get older, like I would probably say around like 75 to 80, like or even 70, you could say like it is more focused on kind of giving back,
Yeah,
like you know either to the grandchildren or your own children. Like, I would say you probably did like whatever you wanted to do to those first 10 years, and you're like, okay, I can give back now. So I think that-
yeah, remember we saw that Maslow's pyramid, at the top of that pyramid was self-transcendence, which means it's no longer about you at that point in life, right? That you kinda just give everything back, give everything away. Leading up to that point is all about you, right? You wanna make all the money, do all the good stuff. So maybe you can promote and market to say, hey, if, there's promotions for events or clothing, you promote grandparents with grandchildren, right? Older people with their grandchildren as a marketing tool. Say, hey, buy more for your grandchildren. Maybe it's life insurance, right? Maybe there's concern, maybe it's pharmaceuticals, things to make you feel better. Assistive devices, travel things, right? You could break them into many markets. You can get as creative as you want to, really, with, kind of segmentation. Some age cohorts, right? Cohorts are just groups of similarities. So we interbellum generation, the silent generation, the war baby generation, baby boom, generation X, Y, Z, and Alpha. Which generation do you belong to? What's your generation?
We're Generation X, right?
No.
Oh, man.
Z? Generation Z, right? Think about it. You, born into technology. Well, anyone born here before smartphones? What was around? Like just regular basic cell phones and Palm Pilots and
I
stuff.
remember.
Cause I'm thinking like the iPhone, and that came out in 07, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so just a few years before.
fairly before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was basic cell phones. They had Palm Pilots, touchscreens, usually with a stylus, and we thought that was the greatest thing ever. I had.
The BlackBerry.
Yeah, the Blackberries as
The
well
phones.
too. Nokia was huge. Nokia was probably one of the biggest, cell phone makers at the time. They were huge. But think about ways of communication. You never had to go and knock on people's doors and you didn't know if they were home or not, right? You want things maybe a little bit more quicker or more patient than even my generation. Maybe we're a little bit more patient.
Write a letter.
Because we come from different generations. Alright, so let's see for context. Baby boomers, right? Baby boomers could mean probably your grandparents, right? Maybe your But baby boomers might be your grandparents. For context, we say baby boomers have a post-war context, right? They came out of World War II, or even say like the Vietnam War or the Korean War. So they know what it's like for the country to be in war, which means you scale back things, be more frugal, right? A little bit more conscious of spending. The behavior, idealism, revolutionary, collectivism. So we say this group thinks alike, right? They have a mindset very much alike. They have a revolutionary mindset. Maybe they think that the government is horrible and they don't trust the government. So maybe the mindset is, hey, we don't trust the government because government, we saw put us into wars and make the economy horrible. And they may be a bit idealistic about all of that as well too. Their consumption, ideology, vinyl, and memories. Ideology can mean they consume maybe on things that were important to them at that time. It could be science fiction. It could be a lot of different novels and writers, movies that came out, The Space Odyssey, et cetera, Star Wars, or maybe even religious, right? They may consume like religious or spiritual virtue, and vinyls and movies. So it means they like to collect things, right? Yeah, they'll still buy streaming stuff, but they may actually have a big collection of vinyl. Even I myself, I have a huge collection of vinyl records. I like vintage, antique things, right? Whereas you buy, I just streaming a movie. I don't want to collect it. That's a lot of extra stuff. All right, Gen X, Generation X. Political transition, capitalism, meritocracy dominate. So I would say this is kind of, I was born towards the end of Gen X. So when I grew up, bless you. There was movies like Wall Street, like dominate, super aggressive economically. Get as much as you can, right? Like buy as much as you can. Buy you a cool convertible. So I grew up in the age of Tom Cruise and convertibles and all that cool stuff, right? And it still kind of exists with me. So it goes to show you that even my mindset is kind of still the same as when I was 5 years old. So capitalism, we love capitalism, right? And dominating it. Behavior could be seen very materialistic, right? Hyper competitive, hyper individualistic, trying to stand out. Consumption may be for status, right? Brand and encourage luxury articles, right? So my group may like more luxury things, certain type of cars, certain watches and clothes, and could be seen very materialistic, right? All right, Gen Y, millennials, right? So millennial, globalized mind, right? Finally starting to integrate communications with everyone all across the world. You got pen pals in India and China. You can have long distance relationships with people in Australia. Finally, the world is connected, right? Economic stability is the context, emergence of the internet. So their mindset is globalist, questioning, oriented to self, right? So having this sort of almost an identity crisis, really trying to figure out self. That's why this area would be like self-development and personal health books. They consume a lot of like, hey, personal health, how to better myself, how to find myself, how to solve the problem of self. What do they consume? Experiences. Experiences could be festivals, travels, concerts. So this group goes to a lot of concerts, do a lot of traveling, and which much more spent on experience than say material brand cards and other things. Right? They buy for experience, not necessarily for brands and articles or status.
Professor,
Yeah.
are you concerned for like the up and coming generations, like the students that are graduating and are gonna be coming into school based on like how, technological like we are, like with technology?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. AI is making the world more easier. It's making two things are happening, right? In some way, children born today can be considered smart. My children already use the tablets, the iPad, they're playing complex games that I can imagine at a 5 and a 4-year-old. I couldn't even imagine, right? I was like just watching cartoons, that was the limitation of what we had available. And if we wanted to learn, you had to read a book, right? But now you're like, they come across so much content, good and bad. But you're probably coming across some content that your mind is not really adapted to. So you're probably creating some self-concept issues later, right? May it be hypersexuality, hyper-materialistic, hyper-socialistic, meaning that, you know, you may have self-esteem issues, want to fit in.
Absolutely.
My group, where I grew up at, I'm like, kind of come from a I don't care group, which means we made fun of people. That was the common denominator. Like, you came to class and you get poked on and made fun of. You go fog outside and that was it. We didn't grow up and, you know, oh, you're canceled and, you know, I was bullied and stuff like that. So it's almost like, just take it. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, right? But it was almost like, oh, this is what it is. It is what it is. So yeah, pros and cons.
I think
Probably a
it's
little bit more smart, but they're probably, the way I kind of view it, smarter but less philosophical.
I feel like these kids now are like less motivated because the answers are right in front of them, like they don't have to try. It doesn't mean that they're dumb, but like at the
No,
same
not at all.
time, it's like taking advantage of what we have, which, you know, who wouldn't do that, but at the same time, it's like, you know, in class, like, students are not really retaining anything, cause they're like, well, I can find the answers online and I can, like, make a paper, turn it in, no one will know unless they get caught, obviously, but it's like, I think it's very concerning, you know, like, when I have kids one day, I would not want that to happen at all, you know?
Yeah, we say, hey, never forget, there's something always lost if there's a medium in between the exchange of human beings, right? This is the greatest form of communication, it always will be. There's always will be a void if you're texting someone and get misinterpreted, mistranslated. You can't see their face, gestures, energy, motives, intentions. You know, so you may think like, hey, I could communicate with more people, but the communication is, it's not the same, it's filtered. The communication is weaker, right? It's more spread out, but it's weaker. So, I don't know, you kind of have to think like, do you want less communication but with good strength? Or do you want more communication with weaker strength? You gotta pick
Very
one.
confusing.
Yeah, right, and so think of that too. In some way, we all are kind of suffering from a disorder of some sort. We all have a mental disorder dealing with attention. Literally think about it. You're like, can you sit in a room for 4 hours straight with no technology whatsoever and just sit and relax and calm? No, you'd probably be after 30 minutes, you'll be anxious, anxiety, like, why is your blood pressure going up? Right? Because I'm bored, I don't know what to do, I'm fidgeting, I don't know what to do in my life. There's usually stuff to be done to satisfy this boredom, to satisfy any impulse control. Right? So we say there's a lack of impulse control. We can't control ourselves, which is the same as any other addiction. Right? Say we can't control, I can't control the crack, I can't control heroin, I can't control my attention span. Yes?
I think for me, if I had to do that, I think it'd be like, if it was like a test and I had no choice, but like, you can't talk to anybody, you have to focus and like, you know, cause I had to take this class for, cause for McDonald's, to be a shift manager, you have to take it's like it's like almost 5-hour class. You have to sit in there and listen and pay attention and take notes and then you take the test. But like, I mean, if I had to do that, like no phone, no nothing, and like not be able to talk to anybody or like participate in, I don't think I could, you know,
Yeah.
put your mind to it, you could do something, but I think because of like, that's why it's concerning and, you know, why I brought it up, because when I had lost my phone and I had lost it, I was gone for 5 hours and I was at work, that's all I could think about and worry about, you know, and it's like, I went on break and I'm just like staring, like I finished my food and I'm like, just sitting there like, damn, what do I do now? But, yeah.
So we become a hyper-socialized society because of social media, but in that we lessens the value of things. So honestly, like, think about it, we take things for granted. And Facebook is free, Instagram is free, Snapchat is free. You're on there all day, like, well, how could it be free? Because they make so much money off the advertisers and marketers that essentially you're just a tool to be there. Right? And so we're like, hey, I gotta get to it, fear of missing out. I gotta see the text, I gotta see what happened in the world, the funny clip, the this, that, and like, what value did that add to your life? Absolutely nothing, because you wake up tomorrow in the same predicament that you were the day before, so really it's, when you start to think about it, like, it's fast food, right? It's like you can't stop eating the fast food, you know it's bad for you.
Do you think that decreases our lifespan? Like, how much time we spend on our phones versus like interacting with people on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, but because, social isolation decreases lifespan, right? There's many studies to show that. And even though you say, well, I have, 3,000 friends on Instagram and 8,000, I'm like, well, how many of them are valuable? You're like, none. I really don't talk to nobody. They're just there to like my posts and blah, blah, blah. You're like, well, there's no valuable relationships. That's still social isolation. You still isolated yourself in some way. You just think that that's an obligation. You get 8,000 followers on Instagram, right? Because the value of those relationships are kind of
It's
useless.
so scary though to me, like really.
Yeah, good point. Okay, and so Generation Y millennials would say they're questioning, oriented to self. They like experiences, festivals, concerts, travel. Gen Z, right? Context, mobility in multiple realities. Social networks, digital natives. Their behavior, undefined identification, right? People don't have maybe a strong identity in this sense. They're trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out who they are, who am I? Communaholic, we just talked about that. Fear of missing out. You want to be part of the community on social media all the time, right? Dialoguer, right? You need the back and forth, right? You need to send messages and you need to receive messages. If that's not happening, you may feel a way about it, right? You may be a little bit more realistic though, right? Like we said, this baby boomers, your grandparents might be a little bit more idealistic, right? Consumption, uniqueness. You buy for uniqueness. We all want to buy a hoodie with a message on the front of the hoodie to say something about who we are, what we think, right? More liquid, sharing economy, and ethical. So your generation appears to be a little bit more ethical, right? Like sustainability, you care about causes, you boycott companies that they don't align with your political beliefs. Sharing economy, you take Uber, you share a ride, all sorts of things like that, and a little bit more liquid. Which means that you may not take on as much debt as these people, right? Say my generation loved debt because they thought they could use it to do a bunch of cool stuff, right? Getting to know Gen Z, born in the late 1990s to early 2000, is most diverse generation, right? There's not laws segregating people about who can marry, who can have children with, right? So most diverse generation. You're able to communicate with all sorts of ethnic groups. People get together and have children and marriages. Digital natives, Gen Y, 1986 to 2002, millennials or echo boomers. Make up about 1/4 of the U.S. population. They spend about $170 billion a year. They're the first to grow up with computers in their homes and in a 500-channel TV universe. So they had a lot more choices, entertainment-wise, than previous generations. Gen X, 46 million, 1965, 1985. Advertisers fell all over themselves to create messages that would not turn off the worldly Gen X cohort. So this is kind of when advertisers get very, very creative. So your cereal commercials, they had a song, and it was a song that was a little tagline that was extremely memorable. And it may be something related to like popular culture in there, right? That kind of started in the 80s and the 70s, right? The 60s big booming event. Today, many are responsible for many culture-changing products and companies. So this group probably had the greatest influence on modern day culture. Got your Steve Jobs with Apple, right? The people born here, you got your Elon Musk, right? You got your Bill Gates, right? You have people like that who completely changed our world, including, musicians, actors, actresses, hip hop, right? Rock and roll, influences all the music that we listen to today. Boomers and seniors, the mature market, two subgroups. Leading edge boomers born between 1946, so remember World War II ended in 1945, so they're right after World War II and 1955. Trailing edge boomers born between 56 and 64. They're active, physically fit. Yeah, they may be older, but they're still out jogging and working out. You'll see them all the time with their New Balance on, right? They're outside with their New Balance on, even though they're older, they're maybe more active and physically fit than even you, right? They're still out there getting. Currently in peak earning years, we say, hey, throughout your lifespan, you typically own the most money you'll ever make in your life in your 40s and 50s, right? The most money you'll ever make in your life typically is when you're in your 40s and your 50s, not your 20s, not your 30s. Say, why would that be? After your brain and experience and everything caught up, it's the apex. After that, physically and cognitively, you may go down. I don't know, right? You may have memory lapses, dementia, et cetera, but that might be the sweet spot of physicality, wisdom, experience, intelligence, et cetera, right? Starting to retire at this age. All right, so here we go. What should marketers know about the baby boomers that you know? What might they be neglecting? What might marketers be neglecting about baby boomers that you think you know? Let's go back. Baby boomers. I kind of feel like that's a repetitive question to the older generation. Okay, let's keep going. I feel like that's too close to talking about the older generation. All right, summarize how our ethnicity, so ethnicity and race shape our identity and often guide our consumption choices. Right? Ethnicity. Raise your hand if you think your ethnic background or race is important as an identity factor, a factor of identity. Raise your hand if you think it's not important. Right? Here, this is interesting though, right? Within every, I want to say every society, but within most societies, dominant groups have more racial emphasis, self-racial emphasis. Usually minority groups place more emphasis on racial and ethnic identity.